Hi, my name's Ariana and this is Le Mot Darling, and today I'm gonna do about like a month and a half wrap up of some of the things I've read, seen, and eaten this past month and a half that I want to talk about. Also, there is construction outside my building that's on the street, and it definitely occasionally is rocking the building because they're like working into the ground and drilling into the ground. So fingers crossed for me, and please for you, that there's no drilling as I'm filming this video. So as I said, I wanted to do a wrap up of what I've been enjoying this past month and a half, and it's been a weird start to 2023 to say the least, but there's a lot of media that I've been enjoying and a lot of meals that I've been loving to cozy up to and to eat. So I just wanted to share some things that have been inspiring me these past few weeks. There's basically one series that I've seen so far this year, and that is White Lotus. I think a lot of people were watching it prior because that's when it came out in autumn. And then I don't know when the first season came out, but the year previously, so 2021. And there's a reason why. It's really the first television show in a long time that I've binged. I watched both seasons within the span of a week. It was that good and that addictive. It's by Mark White, and each season focuses on a different branch, I guess you could say, of this resort called the White Lotus. The first one takes place in Hawaii, and the second one takes place in Sicily and Italy. And they follow the lives of some of the guests and some of the hotel workers at each resort. It's really funny and poignant. I 100% recommend it to everybody who hasn't seen it, because I think there's just something about it that a person can take from it, and it would be different for each person, but they would still be able to take something from this show and be able to enjoy it so much. For me personally, I really enjoyed the first season because it deals more so with class and race relations. It takes place, as I said, on Hawaii, which is obviously a more recent colonial acquisition, I guess you could say, or that sounds terrible. That's a terrible way to put it, but I mean, that's what it is. So it deals with, to varying different degrees, people who are native to Hawaii, people who have come to work at Hawaii, at the hotel specifically, and then also the hotel guests who are clearly very, very rich because it is a very, very expensive resort. I found this portrayal of these subjects to be a lot more nuanced than we see in most popular media within the past year, which at least this season came out 2 years ago, so it's a different year. There's been a lot of eat the rich type of content, which I think is interesting, but I feel like a lot of them are fairly shallow in the representations of the rich and the poor, and it feels like they're kind of rehashing the same ideas without bringing anything new to the table to examine that doesn't feel like just stereotypical and just kind of trying to please, its audience, which is most likely rich people. And I thought this show was able to navigate the stories better. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I think at least with that season, they were able to navigate this certain type of storyline in a much more effective way than a few previous movies and TV shows have been able to do. I mean, of course, besides these more maybe serious storylines, there's also just really funny moments. Jennifer Coolidge is in both of the seasons, and she plays the same character. So besides her, she's the only thing that really carries on between the seasons, besides them both being at the same resort. Same hotel resort, not same location. She's so good at her role. She's really able to play it so well. She says the most weird of things, but it really works, and her storylines and quite a few other really bring a sense of lackadaisical or just less serious storylines to a TV show that can actually be pretty serious, but also, at the end of the day, it's just really fun, and also really fun to binge. I will not lie. So now I want to talk about what I've read, or at least books that have really touched me this past few weeks, and it's actually only one book, so that's easy. And it's Stay True by, I believe you pronounce it as Wasu, but I'm not sure, and I'll let you guys know if it's not that way. But he is an amazing writer. This book is just such a beautifully written book. I originally heard about this book in the New York Times top 10 books of 2022, and so I put it on my list of to be read, and then I saw it in McNally Jackson's in New York when I was visiting in December, and so I knew that I had to get it, and then I read it like a month later. It's a book about male friendship, which, I mean, I feel like I never really hear about within media, and especially in a, for lack of a better word, wholesome way. It's also about identity and how we self-identify ourselves, but then also when it comes to race and how others might identify ourselves, or how we identify ourselves because of the race that we are. It's about two Asian American men who become friends, and that's basically the only thing they have in common, besides that they're very, very different men. But through those differences, they're able to create a friendship. This isn't a spoiler because it's literally in the jacket of the book. But one of these friends dies from a carjacking gone wrong, if that's even possible for it to go correctly. And so for the main character, who is Sue, he's writing a memoir, so it's a nonfiction book, and he's the main character. It's a reflection on how a person can influence your life when they're a part of it, and then also once they leave your life, and how that can change you, how it can change your views. I've also really appreciated it because it talks a lot about the 1990s in Berkeley, because they both went to UC Berkeley, and especially the main character is really into activism and political movements and zine making, the DIY scene, I guess, within Berkeley and UC Berkeley. It's an interesting encapsulation of a time that, I mean, unfortunately can no longer really exist because everything's so digital now. So besides the part of the friendship, what's also really cool about this book is how much it's historical in a certain everyday type of context that is still important to the Asian American experience, the author's experience, and so many other facets of this book. It's also written really beautifully. The prose are so crisp and interesting and engaging. His self-reflections of, I don't know, what is that, 30 years, almost 30 years later. If you're looking for a book to, okay, first of all, cry during, but also just a book that's really powerful in a subtle way, I definitely recommend it. Stay true. So, next we're going to talk about movies. There's so many movies to talk about, so I want to keep it to ones that are maybe not as well known, or one is pretty well known, but I still want to talk about it because it's actually the one that I've seen most recently in theaters, so it's most on my mind, I guess you could say. The first one is called Return to Seoul, or Retour à Seoul, and it's a French movie by David Chu, and I believe that it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival the year prior, so in 2022. It's about a French woman named Frédérique who's looking for her biological parents in Korea. She was adopted by a white family, so she has a weird self-identity that I think a lot of orphans do, orphans that come from different countries, feeling very French, but then obviously having this connection to your home country. In the case of Frédérique, it's South Korea. She's very lost and does quite a lot of things that can be interpreted as really mean to the people around her. But this movie just has so much soul. That's a intended pun, I guess, maybe. You can just really empathize with her, with the main character, and the troubles that she goes through over this 8-year period of finding her parents and becoming more comfortable with what her identity is, and that it's not just French and it's not just South Korean, it's kind of both. This movie is so cool, and I mean that visually, but also the soundtrack is amazing, and that clearly adds to the whole vibe of the movie. It's an original soundtrack, and it's like clearly very Bauhaus influenced, or at least some of the songs are, because some of the songs literally sound like songs by Bauhaus. But it's also just fairly unique. I rarely remember movie soundtracks, but this one really touched me. I mean, besides that, the main actress is really good at, first of all, having you empathize with her, because she's a hard character to empathize with at some points. She can be very, as I said, mean and selfish, but she has her problems. She's able to create such a layered character, and her emotions are so deep within each scene that she creates just such a powerful and human interpretation of a woman who's lost, and one that I think, as I've said several times, the audience can sympathize with and can really take away something from this movie. The second movie that I want to talk about is Bachelorette, which came out more than 10 years ago actually at this point. I think it also was at Cannes, which is funny because I always thought that it wasn't really a Cannes type of movie. It's by Leslie Headland, and it's about basically three women who are kind of similar to Frederic in the sense that they are also really lost, but they also are really mean too, especially to their best friend who's about to get married. She was the one who was bullied, but she's the one who's now the successful and happy and content one, while the other three are very, very unhappy. It stars Kirsten Dunst, Isla Fisher, Lizzie Kaplan, and Rebel Wilson. The first three women play the bridesmaids, or the original best friends, for Rebel Wilson, who's getting married in this movie. It takes place on the night of the bachelorette party, which happens to be the night before the wedding. So it takes place during the party and then after the party, and it's just really funny and really smart. It's filled with very dry, dark humor, and I definitely laughed out loud quite a few times. I feel like this movie kind of went under the rug because I think a lot of people thought that it was basically like a repeat of the movie Bridesmaids or Hangover, but it's a lot smarter than those two movies. No offense to those two movies, I do like them, and in some ways funnier, but in a different way, I think, than both of those movies. So I would say if you've ever heard this movie and thought that it was just a copy-paste repeat of other or both of those movies, that's definitely not the case, and I highly recommend it. Once again, deals with problematic women that I don't know if we're necessarily able to sympathize with. That's another question, but I think they make the movie fun because they keep getting themselves in these problems that are just funny to watch. And it shows how selfish and that they're unable to grow up, even though I don't know how old they're supposed to be in the movie, maybe like late 20s, early 30s. But anyway, I really recommend this movie if you're looking for something that's a little bit lighter but still really funny and a fun movie to watch on a weeknight. And my last movie, which I think most people know about because it's up for at least one Oscar, is Aftersun by Charlotte Wells. This is a movie that stars Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio, and they play father and daughter. It focuses on the relationship of a too young and depressive father and his daughter. The daughter is also too young to really pick up on the minute expressions of his depression, but also old enough that she's able to pick up on things not always being right in their relationship, or especially during this vacation. And it's only when she's an adult and looking back at the footage that she and her father created of their vacation and piecing the puzzles together of their relationship and of his feelings that she's able to come to a better understanding of who he was and who he was during this vacation. It's a beautifully poetic movie with some really beautiful imagery. It's very artistic. Paul Mescal's performance is absolutely brilliant. He is very subtle, but you're still able to get away from his performance that things aren't completely right within his own mind and how he wants to behave as a father. It also feels very nostalgic because it of course takes place during summer holidays, and even if you've never been to Turkey or been to one of these types of resorts that they are at, there just is something very comforting about it, but then also something that's very clearly wrong. So I wouldn't say that you're completely like in a comfortable position within this movie. So if you haven't already seen it, then I highly recommend seeing this movie, especially before the Oscars, so you can understand why Paul Mescal was nominated. For me personally, it's a movie that I would love to rewatch because there's so much going on and it's not necessarily told in a linear fashion. So I'd love to rewatch this movie to better pick up on the metaphorical parts of it, and then also to better piece each scene together and what Wells is trying to evoke. And lastly, I want to talk about food quickly. I've been making some very comforting meals. It's been, not the coldest ever, but it's been cold, so I've been wanting to eat some nice, yummy things. I recently made this week barbecue tempeh for the first time, which was so good. I took it off of a recipe from Amanda Ducks she used to make with tofu, but I used tempeh this time. I put it on a salad, as you can see, and it was a great compliment and a great way to get some added protein in a way that is less boring than how sometimes tofu or tempeh can taste. I also made a kale and butternut squash quiche, which was delicious. I got the recipe from this cookbook, which is in French. I believe it's by a French blogger who I've never followed before, but I saw this cookbook at a bookstore maybe in the beginning, it was in spring, I think, of last year. And it's just about quiches and tarts, both savory and sweet. And it is so good if you like that type of thing. The recipe that I made was amazing. I will say that this was the first time that I had made like the actual crust with real butter. I usually use vegan butter, and I think I prefer vegan butter because it's less creamy and it's less of that very strong flavor that butter has. Great book, even better recipe. Besides that, I also made a fennel and potato gratin. It was just like layers of potato rounds cut thinly and fennel with a creamy sauce with a little bit of balsamic, and then I added a little bit of cheese on top, and it was just so satisfying and so warming to eat on cold days. So I highly recommend if you want something that's very indulgent but isn't the worst thing in the world to eat, especially if you make it by scratch. Lastly, I've been trying to get more into Ortolani's recipes, and this is one of his cookbooks. I recently did a pasta that's with chickpeas and za'atar, and it's a great cupboard pasta that you can make last minute or just with things that you most likely already own. It's cheap, not that time consuming, so it's been fun to discover his recipes, which he's Israeli, so I guess they're more Middle Eastern based and Middle Eastern and Mediterranean based in terms of flavor, but there's a lot to pick from and a lot to investigate. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to see what else I cook for the rest of February and into the rest of March. So I hope you liked this video. It was a little catch-all of everything that I've been enjoying. And if you did like this video, then please like and subscribe. I'm hoping to post more this year, so we'll see how successful I am. Anyway, have a good rest of your day. Bye.